One common question we get in investigations from the client is, can they call the police? If it's a fraud case, embezzlement case, some kind of online scam, can they call the police? Should they call the police? Are the police going to do anything? In general, a fraud against a person is a crime. If somebody improperly takes money from you or steals money from you, technically in most jurisdictions, that's actually a criminal offense. Maybe a misdemeanor, maybe a felony, depends on the jurisdiction. How can you get the police or law enforcement or some other government agency involved with your case? That would be ideal, right? If a government agency would get involved, they would handle your case. You don't have to pay anything. They just take it over and they do the work for you. In reality, most of these could be filed as a police report. The question is anybody going to do anything about it? Whether it's the police, the FBI, district attorney, and so on. In most jurisdictions, there are either public or non-published restrictions on taking financial cases. Some states look at it like it's a civil matter. If you have a dispute against somebody where they defrauded you or took your money, they're going to say you need to sue them in court. Some jurisdictions will have the ability to have criminal prosecutions endeavored. However, they may have a threshold or a limit. Unless it's over 2 million or 3 million, they might not get involved. Sometimes it depends upon if there's any physical harm involved. If it was a robbery, if it was a home invasion, that's a different story. In practical terms, if you go to your local police department to report a crime that is like an online scam or a fraud or embezzlement, more than likely they are going to discourage that report from being taken. They might say you have to file it in the jurisdiction where the other person is, or they might say it's a civil matter. Sometimes they'll take the report, but in reality, detectives in a police department are not going to drop all their cases to work on a online scam or fraud case, even if it's 100,000 or 200,000. Many of the cases they work on are more intense in terms of the results. It may be something with physical harm. There's murder cases, carjacking, that kind of thing. It's not that the police are bad or they don't want to help you. It's just they're very understaffed. Police departments, like every government agency, are underfunded, understaffed, and overworked. There's a lot more cases coming across their desk. So what do you do in that scenario where you have a case that you would like to have be prosecuted? Maybe it's just a matter of principle or spite. Look, that person stole your money. You want them to see their justice. You want that person to face the consequences of their actions. That's fine. If you do want to increase the probability that a district attorney or police department or some other agency will be interested in it, you have to bring them more than just your word or more than just a vague description of it. Look, you know your case inside and out. You went online, you sent $1,000, they asked for more, eventually you sent $82,000 to this person and you got defrauded in cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or some online scam, and they didn't send your money back. You know your story, you know your case. Even if you recite that case to the police officer, they're not going to know it as well as you do, and of course they don't have the time to really look at all your records and documents to know if what you're saying really rises to the level of a crime. You know it probably does, but they have hundreds and hundreds of victims coming to them every day with similar stories. They just don't have the time to find out which ones are worth their chasing. However, if you bring them a complete case file with all the proof, I'm not just talking about screenshots of your text message, the proof that it was a scam, the identities of the people, that's important, because if you are doing some type of online investment that turns out to be a scam, many times the names, addresses, company names that are used by these people are false. They're not the real identities of these scammers. The police don't have anything to go on there. They could certainly find it out. Look, if that person was an axe murderer, they'd find out what screen name Joe Schmo 123 is, right? They would be able to figure that out. But they're not going to go through that trouble of doing all that for some alleged financial scam, right? So if you can have all that to hand it to them on a silver platter, Police departments, district attorneys love wins. They love prosecutions. They like their case ratio to be successful prosecutions. So if you bring them everything they need, all they have to do is, file it. That's a different story. You might have a higher probability of getting the case taken if you have everything handed to them on a silver platter, literally. Not just your records. Your records just show what your perception is, not the whole case. The other thing you can do is to show a demonstrable pattern, where if you have other victims or other stories that match it up, where you have not just one victim, but you have 20 or 30 people that all have documentation. Again, don't just call them up or email them and say, here's what I have. Put everything together very organized. And your definition of organized might be different than the police department's, right? Most people just have a pile of stuff or a batch of emails. Sort them out, put them in different categories. Make some kind of official looking report, so that way the police department takes you seriously. You're not just somebody who was too stupid to avoid being scammed, right? They want to help you, but they want to have some ease of processing. Again, not because they're lazy, not because they're doing a bad job. It's they have thousands of cases to pick from. They can maybe pick 5 that they have the time to work on. And you might think you pay your tax dollars, they should do it. They just don't have enough manpower to go around. We'll do a quick run through of some stories just to prove that point. In Austin, police are urging robbery victims not to call 911. Robbery. In Dallas, they require online reporting instead of 911. And some of these crimes are pretty serious. Auto theft, mail fraud. In El Cajon, they hope residents don't call 911. Now, this is 4th of July. Portland warns people not to call 911 unless they're at risk of death. Risk of death to call 911. And in Austin, somebody else had an editorial that says, will the police even answer the phone? In some cases, we're seeing police departments, they don't even answer the phone. Now, granted, some of these articles are a little bit biased or a little bit slanted. And your case isn't a 911 case. You wouldn't call 911 anyway. It's not an immediate, urgent, life or death threat of bodily injury case. It's a financial case. But you might call the police. They have what they call K-prop, crimes against property. They have a financial investigative unit. District attorneys have this. But again, they are very selective about their cases. So what you want to do is, if you don't want to use the private sector, if you don't want to have a private investigator with the expense of doing your case, and you want the public sector, police, law enforcement, government, to take your case, you really have to do a lot of legwork yourself first. Do your own investigation. Find out the names of the people. Do some asset searching, right? Do some background information. Get some forensics done on your digital data to find out what IP addresses were used. If you can give all that to them, now they have a head start, and they know that you're serious about it. It's not just somebody who wants to dump your problem on their lap. They have plenty of problems for people. And great, in an ideal world, you'd want somebody to take over for you and just take care of you. But the police aren't able to do that. Even in cases where there's a divorce case where the other party is defrauding them, forging documents, forging checks. We've seen cases where the police says, look, it's a civil matter. We don't want to get involved with two people disputing each other. Because that's what a lot of people want to do. When there's a dispute, they want to get the police involved on their side to crush the other side. The police don't know in advance if you're legitimate or not, and they know a lot of times people that do that aren't really acting in best faith. So they avoid it altogether. Little anecdotal story. In 2008, that's like 15 years ago, we attended, myself and a couple of our team members, a fraud investigators conference. This one happened to be in Texas. And at this conference, there were hundreds of attendees who were fraud investigators. Many of them worked for government agencies, FBI, district attorneys, State Department of Investigation. Some of them were private sector, private investigators, forensic accountants, digital investigators. And there was a lot of really good information, presenters, seminars, information about how to do investigations, how to get asset research done. And in between these seminars, there were break periods, and there was a lunch period, right? So there was about an hour and a half for lunch, and everybody went and sat down in this big banquet hall. It was a catered lunch, and you sat at the table and they brought over your food, whatever they have for lunch, and you sat at a table with about 12 or 15 other people. And it was kind of random. You just sat wherever you wanted, and you ended up with whoever was near you, and you had some conversation and some networking. And about 80% of the people at this conference were government, law enforcement, .FBI, .police, whatever. I mean, they were government. So at the table, I started asking questions like, how do you handle fraud investigations? How do you handle embezzlement inquiries? If somebody calls your department, how do you do it? And, they said, look, unofficially, we have a threshold. It shouldn't be that way. We'd want to take every case, but unfortunately, our guidelines say unless it's over a certain amount of money, we don't take the case. We might take a report, put it in our file. We're not going to drop everything and do it. We'll keep all the names on file in case it pops up somewhere else. Maybe if that scammer, does 100 cases and now it meets the threshold, we might do it, but more than likely we're not going to do it. And I asked some of the people, what are the thresholds? Well, one of the agencies was from a large county in Texas that had probably 700,000 people living in the county. Less than a million, but a lot of people. Their threshold was, at the time, $200,000. Unless it was a $200,000 claim, they didn't take the case. Another city had about, maybe 20,000 residents, and their threshold was $60,000. But even then, they didn't necessarily have the resources to follow it through. They might have to try to get the FBI to get involved. So don't be discouraged if you try to bring a case to the police and they don't look like they're really trying to drop everything to help you, because they just can't. It's not their fault. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the budgeting. At the same time, there are some things you can do. You can file it with WC3, which is an online internet reporting to the FBI. They're not going to drop everything and take your case either. But if they do see the name show up elsewhere and sometime down the road they do something with the case, they might be in contact with you. Of course, you always have the option of a private investigation. You can see a link below to doing a consultation with one of our licensed investigators. But if you do want to prefer to try to keep it with the public sector, police, law enforcement, district attorney, those are the things you can do. Make that case wrapped up in a bow. So they don't really have to do any work. They can just file it and get an automatic win without having to worry about if there's any validity to the case. Look, I know you believe there's validity to your case, but the police department doesn't know that, and for them to find out would take more time and effort than they can afford to expend on your case. Let us know if we can help with anything in the meantime.